Welcome to the Social Media Church podcast. I am with my good friend, Jay Kranda. Jay, welcome back to the podcast.
I know it's been a while, man. It's been a while.
Yeah, I miss you. Jay, I love you. We all have missed you. And it's been a crazy time in the world of church online. You and I, 10 years ago or so, we're in this, we were the crazy ones that were the, I think about all the names we were called of blasphemous. How could you do church on the internet? It's not real church. Now, all of a sudden, every single church in the world is an online church. And the knowledge that we gained over the last 10 years is now all of a sudden valuable. Jay, I want to hear what's been going on in your world the last 3 months. What are you learning? What are you seeing? What are you experiencing right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, it's just, even for us, we've been streaming for a long time, and I've been in my role for a long time. But even with this COVID thing, it moved us into a different season of online. And even figuring out, what does it look like when we go back to meeting in person? We're in California, and we're a large church. So we're still in a mode where it's going to be a while till we can go back into the past season that we were in. And so it was early on. The first couple of weeks were very much around like, how is this all working? I joked, I had a lot of online pastor friends text me about things. And one of the big things I was dealing with that I think a lot of people were dealing with is that, you had a lot of hands in the cookie jar where like a lot of people had thoughts about online. And I remember just texting a couple of friends like, hey, this is everybody's church. So of course everyone's going to be engaged. Don't be afraid of things, change and some of your responsibilities go away and some, evolve. And so that was something, but that was different, but it was really fun to be part of the conversation. I got to say, there were more eyes. Our attendance was going times by 5 very quickly. And then it was really fun. I was in the first couple of weeks was in a role of really talking to a lot of our teams of how to shift, which was a lot of fun because it was figuring out problems for other teams that I just hadn't thought about, and there were some of our care online, some of those ministries of how are you going to solve this? And, some of it was, I had thoughts and some of it was I have no idea. And so it was fun to watch really every kind of staff member and volunteer at our church figure out online. And there was a lot of innovation from a lot of cool ministries and a lot of cool thinkers where honestly pre-COVID, they were so anti-online. And now it's now they're thriving online. And so it's been really fun. The other thing was, it was interesting to watch people experience a lull too, when you had the first couple of weeks of boom. And then it was
Easter too.
Yeah, it was the first week of COVID, it was a boom. And then 3 weeks later, it was Easter, boom. And then I started to get all these questions 3 weeks after Easter. It was hey, is your attendance getting hurt? And I was yeah, you had 2 huge injections. There's no way we're going to sustain that. So then, helping people figure that out. What does this mean? Are we doing something wrong? And so it's been a blast. And now we're a little bit more normalized, especially as people start to go back to meeting in person. But it's been crazy, man.
Yeah, I love it. I think what's fun is God kind of forced this moment. And I think what people are seeing is how real this engagement and community can be online. I think the other side is, Jay, that the technology helps make it more real. Zoom and video conferencing, I remember trying to do video conferencing groups 10 years ago, and it just wasn't. Skype didn't get it done. Google Hangouts didn't get it done. But now it's so much more accessible. Streaming is much more stable. Almost everybody has high-speed internet now at home to stream. Almost everybody has a connected TV device of some sort. And so there's just technology has gotten us to a place of creating a much better at-home streaming experience.
Which,
Jay, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, you nailed it right there. I think that's actually the bigger thing, streaming your service on YouTube, Facebook, all that stuff. I think, yes, there's a bunch of churches that turn that on, but the larger thing is this adoption of video conferencing platforms like Zoom that is huger, is a bigger deal for the church because, it's like 1983. You had like public internet, people like static PDFs getting information online. 2002, 2003, you have like MySpaces and Facebooks of the world where you have community. In 2020, you have this like forced adoption of Zoom. And like that moment is huge because it's the education. It's never about like when the technology is born. The internet's, you know, been around since the ARPANET days. The key now is that everybody had to jump on a video call of some form, and most likely it was Zoom because Zoom made it the easiest with the less friction. And so I think that was for me the bigger thing for the church. It's like, you know, doing you know, staff meetings online, doing family events online, doing all those things, I think was the larger thing for like the online church movement or whatever you want to call it, because people aren't really experiencing I would say they're experiencing content when they're watching your church service online, but when they're on an event on Zoom or an online group or a connect with you on Zoom, they're starting to go, wow, like this is powerful. Like you and I, for example, our relationship, our friendship is primarily based off of Zoom.
Yes.
And we're friends. Like I call you a friend, and I don't mean that lightheartely. Like you are a friend. But we know this because Zoom works for us. Like we've committed to it, and I've been a Zoom user for like, you know, 4 or 5 years. And so we get it. And I think the church, you know, a lot of pastors and members have experienced in the last, you know, 10 weeks, they've realized, wow, this is possible. And so I think the Zoom kind of video conferencing like adoption is like a larger point in this moment for me.
Agreed. It's a huge deal. And I think you're seeing it too from a Facebook now jumping into this, Google now prioritizing this in Google Meet. It's an exciting day from these big tech companies shifting their focus in many ways in a way that creates deeper human interaction and more personal human interaction. Jay, I want to skip ahead to the future. You know, so now that we're kind of, you know, in this COVID forced to do online church, I got to tell you this too, Jay, this is a random, just personal thing. I found out yesterday, my wife had coronavirus. So we just did the antibody test. She tested positive. So I assumed I had it. I took the test. I tested negative. So how crazy is that? Wow. We didn't even know. So she lost her taste buds at one point, and she thought maybe, but no temperature, anything. Just a crazy, like,
wow.
It was in my house. Anyways, we're good. we're
good. I'm glad you guys
we're safe and healthy. But that was a crazy, like, wow. It actually was in our home. So, but our future, we're moving into the future. What goes back to normal? And I say normal, like what we always knew of, like online churches is back to this random like side thing, or what do you think our new normal looks like in the world of online church?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for sure, the obvious stuff. I think that there are true gaps with online. I think like care and grieving. You know, I had a conversation with a chaplain a couple of weeks ago about how does Saddleback do care online, and because he's having to do Zoom calls with patients that are dying with family members, and it was very obvious, like some of this digital stuff is not ideal. You know, my grandma had a surgery a couple of weeks ago, and you know, I remember like I can't even go over there to see her because she's in a high risk category. Yeah. And I mean, some of that stuff is apparent. So a lot of all that's going to go back, like funerals online. That's not the way funerals should be done. Like, so I think overall, a lot of that stuff, the gaps of online are being amplified right now. And I think anybody who's like the extremist is saying like everything can be done online. I think, you know, you're realizing like, hey, maybe not everything, you know, is not the ideal. Maybe online is great. But let's not make it for everything. In person is valuable. The same way as we're all getting antsy to go sit down at a restaurant. Yes. You know what I mean? Like takeout is great and eating out is great, but sometimes you just want to go sit down and go somewhere. And I think that shows that like in person is valuable and should be part of your strategy if it's an option. So, but I think we're going to move into a phase where a lot of churches are realizing, wow, we should invest. The same way as we invest into our physical buildings, we need to invest in our online product, both in the website, into how we staff people. Both, you know, if you're a large church, it's hiring people to oversee a social media plan, hiring an online pastor. I think if you're a smaller or medium-sized church, you're figuring out how to, hire somebody on a contract base or get people that can build this up. I think that there's going to be this, it's kind of like, it's the way that there's a flood of investment into real estate when like the market drops, people start buying up stuff. I think we're going to move into a phase where people are going to start investing into their online product. Overall, I think online groups are here to stay.
Yep.
As much as I think in-person groups are here to stay as well, I think people are realizing like online groups are a great option for people, for all sorts.
Locally too.
It's understanding like maybe if somebody like care groups, like somebody that's going through a spousal abuse issue or a depression issue, maybe they want to meet online because jumping in person is a big jump. Doesn't mean you don't push that still, but maybe they do want to jump on a call and not share their face right away. Maybe for people that are traveling or have work schedules that are hard, or maybe are new parents, maybe an online group works great. And so I think online groups are going to be a huge thing that are going to continue on. And then for sure that I think that we're all experiencing, I feel like people are realizing even with staffing, I'm intrigued with the remote work. Are we going to move into a phase where people like, you can hire an online pastor from out of state?
Yes.
I think that's going to be the most intriguing thing. I don't know if you've talked about this, but I've been watching even our own staff like experience like why Zoom meetings work better for some meetings and why some of this remote stuff, you can downsize some of your buildings and stuff. That sometimes you can't do that, but I'm wondering if like, I thought it was crazy to think you could actually have somebody on staff out of state at your church. And now I'm like, I don't know, man. I feel like if your church has an online vision, maybe you could have an online pastor who's out of state overseeing this because they're fully part of your strategy. I don't know. Those are some
and Jay, I got offered a job 2 weeks ago with a church out of state to join their executive team, asking if I would come on full time. So I think just to reinforce, I'm not taking the job. I'm very happy at Dunham and Company and all the different things that I do. But it was fascinating because I was at Community Bible Church and I moved to New York, and that seemed crazy, but I had depth of relationship there, and it was intentional to be temporary. But this was a church that said, stay in New York, but work for us and it's not close to New York. And it was fascinating, that they would be that, because they first asked me if I'd be willing to move. And I said, I'm not really interested in a job. But I definitely am not moving. And they said, well, what if you could stay in New York? And anyways, it was so interesting.
No, you're totally right. I can't believe. I like how vague you were on the location. That was perfect.
I feel like I'm being, because I think I've told Dunham and Company that happened, but it reinforces what you're saying, because I think that is going to happen more and more, because you can hire a good number of your staff, your IT staff, potentially your, whatever that might be. It opens up all kinds of windows. The other thing, Jay, that I think is interesting in that is, I just lost my train of thought. I was going down a path in my mind of people living and working else. Oh, with staffing. A couple of churches that I've been talking to are actually doing away with the role of online pastor, and they're basically making their entire executive team their online pastors, and their because what in some ways is, it's kind of like, go do this thing on an island over here. And now they're saying this is just as much as important as our physical campus. And so we're not going to just designate. Now, I think there's still some confusion there. But it's an interesting shift.
I think for sure, if you're a super large church, that approach probably makes more sense. Now, obviously, the online pastor role is still important. I think you need a designated person over the strategy. But for example, our church, we have 18 locations. So the thought, what's the value of online when each of these 18 locations online? And geography is inherently it's not important. And so I think those are the questions large churches are figuring out. I think the key is the medium-sized churches. I think it's really like, hey, do we hire somebody who is just like online, or do we hire an online campus pastor? And the question I keep going back to churches when they ask me that question, it's, do you want to have a vision for people who live 30 miles away from your church?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if the answer is yes, then I think you need to start embracing this online kind of pastor role. If it's all local, then you need like a host, coordinator, pastor role who's going to do a bunch of stuff, but it's more integrated into your church and it's not a campus. And that's the thing. Like, and you know, it's funny. It's so crazy that somebody's already talked to you about that, because I've gotten the number one question I'm getting right now, it's outside of just like, how do you do things online? It's like, do you have a job description? Because we're hiring. And I just got a text from a large kind of staffing organization that they were like asking me like, do you have any leads? Because we're starting to get requests to hire people. And I'm like, wow, it's so funny how like, you know, I think back to, 8 years ago and I got offered this job opportunity to be the online pastor. And at the time, one of my friends told me, it's like, I wouldn't take that job because it's not going to be around. And now it's like, we are moving to a moment here that like, it's going to be bigger. Now, I think the problem is, and I wrote a post about this a couple of years ago about the settlement, that the settlement's coming. And the idea is that like, and the idea is that like, California and the West was this untamed land, and eventually it got settled. And, I lived in suburbia in California 100 years ago. This was like an untamed land. And I think we're moving into that with online church. It's going to be suburbanized in a way. And we gotta, that means your thinking is going to be really important. So I'm really excited, but I'm also nervous because some of these ideas and decisions need to be done right. And I think some bigger questions need to be figured out, and churches need to figure out how to not copy and paste what other churches are doing in large churches, what Life Church is doing, what Saddleback's doing, what Community Bible Church was doing. Like, you guys can't just use that model. You got to figure out your unique thing and figure out what does digital mean, because the internet is ultimately at its best when all these quirky, unique sub threads of the internet represent itself. I think about like Reddit. Reddit is thriving because you are yourself, and you find people, and your church needs to figure that out and do that right online. And I want to encourage them not to just do a copy and paste, but I think that's the larger thing churches have to wrestle with.
Jay, you're a very sought after man. We've only got a couple minutes because you got another important meeting to go to, and I appreciate your giving us your time and speaking your wisdom. Before we go, any last thoughts of wisdom from the Godfather of online church as we wrap up this conversation?
As long as I don't end up with like a horse head in my bed or something, that's like a threat.
You won't.
I think the biggest thing is I would encourage anybody listening to this that wants to do online or wants to figure this out or is struggling, get all your key people at your church in a room. And ask that question of like, do we want to have a vision for people beyond 30 miles? Yes or no? And it's okay if it's a no, but then draw your church's methodology, your philosophy up on a board, your funnel, whatever it is, your bases, I don't care. And then figure out, cut it up into phases. You know what? For the next 3 months, we just want to figure out this part. And we don't want to do baptism and communion online. Let's, for example, that's okay. And then say, okay, first 6 months, this, next 6 months, this, and just start to figure it out. But have a large conversation with all your senior leadership and figure it out, because if you just put the youngest person in the room to go do it, they're going to go get themselves killed unintentionally. But have a big conversation about it. And it's okay if it's contentious. It's okay if there's some things that are no right now, but define the sandbox, give space for somebody to go figure it out. And then once they figure that out, you can move to the next thing. You don't got to all figure it out at once.
Yeah. Great advice. Jay, we love you. We miss you. Thank you for leading the way. Thank you for being bold and going first and sharing your wisdom and knowledge. If you have any questions about Social Media Church, go to socialmedia.church, and everything about the podcast in the years. There's probably 100 podcasts with Jay on them from years ago. Go listen to those. Go listen to this episode and other episodes again, and all the show notes and all the fun things. Go leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening. We will talk to you again on the next episode.